You know, so I was explaining this a little bit, so those who were eating dinner with me will hear something that I already said, but I started being interested in how easily a lot of people who write about transitional justice have faith that law fixed a lot of things. And I wanted to say, law can fix certain smallish but important things, and there's a lot of other stuff that could never get done. And for that reason, I started looking at what law was actually doing, and that led me to reading transcripts of testimony and attending trials. And then I noticed it's weird how certain things just can't get heard in this space. So it was like I was starting out to actually write a book about law, and it ended up being a book about something entirely else. And it was just in trying to find out how to make the argument about the limits to law led me to what I think is the more interesting argument about listening. Does that get at your question?
Do you mind if I follow up?
No.
I think I was thinking, so, I was thinking of sort of like a Fanonian edge to it, that there's something lost in the kind of prioritizing it like a discursive level rather than a political one or an actional one. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the question that this gentleman was asking about, how conversations can end up just reproducing status quos, even more so than just in testimonials that are bound by law, but also our own satisfactions that we gain out of hearing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a different register of what we've been talking about with regard to the way in which a lot of us, it's comfortable to hear something and know what it means. And it's uncomfortable to not know what's going on, or to feel like, am I being accused? Or to feel like, oh, that sounds really hard. How am I supposed to react to that? Like, all that stuff's really uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people, without even assessing what's going on, jump to the most comfortable spot. And that happens in interpersonal relationships, it happens on the level of discourse, it happens in politics, it happens in law. And I think, you know, one of the points of the book, as someone who's mostly a philosopher, was that the way we read, the way we interpret the world, the way we train ourselves to hear others, the way we train ourselves to listen for our own failures, those seem like small things, but they can radiate outward in pretty large ways, I think, you know? So, like, if each of us just told ourselves a slightly different story about how we came to be the self that we are, you know, that it wasn't like, I'm large and in charge now that I'm an adult type of a story, like the American story of freedom and autonomy, which is just part of the story. You admitted that all this stuff you didn't get to choose went into making who you were. That, like, readjusts the way the world works in ways that might make some of these ways of hearing more possible. So, for me, I think sometimes what seems like a tiny thing can end up having a huge impact.
I was asking a follow-up to that question. If we're de-emphasizing understanding towards recognizing the situation of another person, not isolating them, which, like, I think I heard you correctly on, like, something similar to that issue. The point of the matter is to hear without imposing one's own comfortable circumstances, so not only diminishing the suffering, but isolating the individual that has suffered. In what way does recognizing otherness in that way align with responding to it if understanding is left out of between those two?
Yeah, so I would tweak a little bit what you said. I wouldn't say I'm de-emphasizing understanding. What I'm doing is de-emphasizing the arrogant sense that you do understand when you don't, so that you might actually understand, right? So if you become more able to say, whew, there's something that I just kind of don't get, I need to learn more. I will ask this person different questions than I would if I just jumped to the part that made me comfortable. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, none of us can afford to be uncomfortable all the time, you know, but as you can tell from the stories I told, I'm not talking about, well, for some people that is every day, but like, I'm not talking necessarily about something that happens every single day. On a small level, it probably does, as we've seen by some of the stories that were told by your fellow students, right? But, so, it's de-emphasizing a certain type of understanding in order to actually understand rather than believe you do when you don't. Does that make sense? Yeah. You've had your hand up for a while.
So you use the term autonomy fairly frequently, and you seem to mean it a lot differently than it is used in other situations. What do you mean when you say autonomy?
I mean the broad sense it has both in American political liberalism and in stories in American politics about what a self is. You know, just the idea that anything that happens to me has to be something that I could have said yes to. Obviously, the story of consent is a very important story in a lot of contexts. Very important story in a lot of contexts. Don't get me wrong. But all kinds of stuff that made us who we are was stuff we didn't get to choose. And not all of that's bad. So that's what I mean. And there's all kinds of more nuanced ways that people talk about autonomy. And I'm not trying to take that away from them.
Okay,